Welcome to the Social Housing Podcast. I'm your host, Mohammed Sheikh. I'm Head of Marketing here at VoiceGate, the leader in engagement technology to the social housing sector. Today, I'm really pleased to welcome Suzanne Adams. She's a strategic leader, a change catalyst with over 25 years at the forefront of housing transformation. Among them, while head of digital at Southern Housing, Suzanne hasn't just witnessed the evolution of the sector, she's actively engaged it, engineered it. So it's been long before we talked about agentic AI, that became a buzzword, didn't it? Suzanne was already deploying a digital workforce of intelligent agents to manage multi-million-pound rent processes, complex benefit claims, high-value finance mailboxes. So, Suzanne, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mohammed. I had to smile when you mentioned agentic AI, because when we were first building bots to handle universal credit and the purchase ledger mailbox, we didn't have that fancy language at that time. We just knew we had a problem to solve. But looking back, we were just laying the foundations for exactly what we're talking about today. Systems that don't just follow a script, but actively do the heavy lifting on behalf of the organisation.
Right. Yeah. So, Suzanne, I'm really excited to understand your journey and your career path, and it's gonna give us some really useful insights, I think. It's been what 25 years you've been in social housing, is that right?
It has, yes. 29, well, 30 years this July I've been in social housing, a very long
Amazing.
period.
Well, congratulations. And you've spent nearly, was it 2 decades at Southern Housing?
Yes, I was there from the onset, from the loan stock transfer, the early days of swell housing on the onslaught of 7,000 properties to leaving Southern Housing in January of this year when we were
Okay.
a larger, more complex organisation with over 90,000 properties and looking over the 90, to 90,000 households and delivering services to them.
Sure. Yeah, so we know that Southern Housing have been through a number of iterations and multiple mergers over the years. And you've tracked that entire arc, haven't you? So I'm interested to know, how did that shape your view on automation? How did you go from automation being a nice to have, an interesting concept, to being absolutely essential to your processes?
And it has been a massive shift. I started close to the front line, and back then, you're absolutely right, automation was a luxury. But as we merged and as housing associations become more complicated, data exploded, more systems, more data, more pressure, more legislation, the old manual ways just didn't simply scale anymore. And a massive turning point in my career with automation and working at Southern was a housing innovation lab we ran with BT a number of years ago, where we brought residents and colleagues together and we asked one simple question. So where does the organisation cause you friction? And the answers and the responses were very human. Repetitive admin, delays. Our talented people are spending their time and days firefighting instead of helping our residents. So that's where my mantra was first born. So automate what we can, eliminate what we don't need, and innovate where our humans and our colleagues add the most value. And from that moment, automation stopped becoming a nice to have and an essential, and it became part of our infrastructure and how we were going to deliver services.
So that's a really important point. I think it might be useful here, actually, Suzanne, at this moment, to if you were to just help us out with a bit of a definition of agentic AI. So for the uninitiated, including myself, I'm aware that it is a form of AI that is different to the traditional form of AI, where it's more goal-oriented. It's less about giving it tasks to do and it allowing it to act with relative autonomy. Can you just give me your definition, just fill in some of the gaps for the audience?
No, absolutely. We started in a world of generative AI, so where it creates documentation for you and speaks words. Agentic AI is taking that to the next layer. So that's where it enables it to deliver tasks. So it delivers workflows. So it enables you to deliver an end-to-end service. So it just doesn't bubble information up. It acts on that information as well. And that's the difference between generative AI and our more automative and being spearheaded at the moment by the likes of Google of agentic AI. So it becomes the doing of the automation, or the doing of the bots, or the doing of the task from more end to end.
Right. Yeah. So I'm interested to just dig into a little bit about the BT Innovation Lab that you mentioned. I'm sure that was a very interesting and informative and directive kind of piece of work that you were doing. So when you were in the organisation at Southern, you're looking to identify tasks that are repetitive, they're resource heavy, I assume, things that could be easily automated. So what for you in that exercise was the light bulb moment? When did you realize just how much time and effort was being wasted by manual processes?
I won't lie, I'm obsessed with with work and how it actually flows, and not how we think it flows. The big realization was where our most skilled people were acting as human bridges, essentially. So they were just spending their intelligence cutting and pasting information, or researching information, or processing thousands and thousands of documents from one screen to another.
Yeah.
The light bulb moment for me was around if a task is predictable, it's high volume and rule driven, it doesn't belong on a human's to-do list. We needed agents, automations that could read, interpret and act long before agentic AI existed. And that's exactly what we were building.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're starting small first, aren't you? You're starting with the automation journey. Where did that automation journey begin? What was the first area you decided to, what problem were you trying to solve initially?
We held initially, so following on from the Innovation Centre, we then held workshops in the organisation. So there was lots of come and bring us your problems, service design in older language. So we worked collectively with the whole organisation to say these are the rules. If you have high volume tasks that are repetitive with a set of rules, come join our workshop and pitch your idea. And they were our criteria for success, and our first steps on that change journey. And from those workshops, from the whole organisation, we were pitched many ideas, and we took that pitch down to the top 5, and that's what our programme was going to first look at. So universal credit was the processing of claims, purchase ledger with our finance colleagues, looking at how we managed housing benefit documentation and incoming, and then council tax invoices and a whole host of other processes. And that's how our first programme was born. So it came by the organisation, from the organisation, and we prioritised what the biggest impact was to start looking at our automation journey.
Right. So with housing benefit, you're actually attacking a significant area of inefficiency. I'm presuming you went for the big win pretty much straight away, didn't you?
We looked at high value transactions that took a lot of time, that were under a huge amount of scrutiny, that impacted our residents. So things like the processing of our universal credit claims on a daily basis used to attract a high value of claims, lifting and shifting, searching data, validating that and sending that back. So on a daily basis, that was one person's task. But during rent increase time, that was a team of 10 people's tasks. And we work within very difficult or time constraints then around processing that level of claims. And then when you look at things like purchase ledger inboxes, where they're on average receiving over between 500 and 1,000 hits on a day, bring that up to year end, and you're looking at 2,000 or 3,000 hits a day. That's a lot of transactions that are high volume with a clear set of rules, where we can clearly identify quick wins for both as an organisation, to enable our staff to deal with, to enable our staff, to free our staff to deal with more complicated information, and then become co-authors or producers of that instead of trying to tackle the information. So it was a huge light bulb moment of being able to deliver those high, the start of our program and those high value transactions for us as a first level into the automation world.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether there were any particular surprises that came. What surprised you when you went live, for example?
Oh, surprises is it was no surprises, because when you're working with automation or any type of AI or new technology, we need to ensure we have guardrails in place. Yeah. It needs to be responsible AI, even in those early days. So our look of impact around data protection, how that works. So it needs to be responsible and safe. So the guardrails that are in place to deliver our first sense into the world of automation. So we need to be safe and secure from that side. The biggest surprise that always comes from this is data. So, how we work with data, and how data is the foundation of all automation for both generative AI, agentic AI, or robotic process and automation. Right. So our biggest surprise is the quality of our data. The better quality of data, the higher impact automation can deliver for you as an organisation. And if the data's not accurate, right. Or we don't have that data, then there's only so much that we can automate as part of that process.
Sure. We'll come back to data in a minute, because I think that's Absolutely. A really important point here. Just going back to the universal credit and the benefits engine that you created, you spoke about projects where automation is removing or automating tens of thousands of processes of claims, and that I presume would have taken an entire team of people previously to do. Interestingly, at VoiceGate, we've now acquired Enterprise RPA. That brings RPA into our platform. So can you just talk us through what kind of automation actually works in practice? Is there a difference? Is there is it worth defining? And what's the impact on frontline housing teams?
We touched on it earlier. It's anything that is high volume, repetitive tasks with guardrails or a set of rules around them. Because we're not in the age at the moment where automation, agentic AI, can think for itself. So automation works for us within a clear set of rules, and where it's not able to execute those clear set of rules, it will exception it. And that's where our guardrails come into place, or our humans in the loop come to that. Right. So the likes of universal credit claims, high volume transactions, rent increase time potentially, whilst at Southern, that looked between 25 and 30,000 transactions in a 6-week period. Scale, onto the size of the organisation. Purchase ledger, you're looking at thousands of transactions coming in that need to be, processed. So anything at large scale, housing benefit letters, universal credit overpayments, anything that comes in large scale volumes with a set of clear defined rules is absolutely a clear case for automation. So where people don't need to do this rent increase letters, the changes of rent increase, the use cases within housing is quite limitless, really, in some of those transactions that we should be looking to be able to pick up to automate in that aspect. And the benefits that then come from that, so 25,000 claims in a 6-week period would take a team of 10 fixed term people delivering delivering that service in quite a repetitive and quite a morale busting kind of process. Doing the same thing, doing that trudge of dealing with that. The ascent of putting in automation, it clears the backlog. Okay, so there are no backlog. Claims and processes and invoices are delivered because automation can work 24/7, Saturdays and Sundays, doesn't know bank holidays, and processes round the clock, and that delivers. So the benefits are it reduces the backlogs for all of our staff. The teams, they move from becoming data processors to up to co-owners and producers and deliverers of that more complicated service. And our residents, they get answers automatically. They get their claims processed quicker, essentially. So there's no waiting for them. Our contractors or anyone else that we're working with or third party get their invoices, delivered on time. So what it does do is give us a harmonious service that just doesn't impact our colleagues and stakeholders, but it's both anyone that has an impact on that service as well. It also it governs our data and makes that cleanliness. It gives us a full transparency on the service and how we deliver that. But it enables us to innovate the boring out of the service that we're delivering.
I mean, that's interesting in and of itself. I think that's something I'm going to come back to actually, because it's changing, as you said, the tenant experience. It's building trust. It's making tenancies more sustainable.
Absolutely.
But for colleagues as well, it's an interesting area. I mean, it's a particularly interesting area for me because automation and what it does to a person's working life and day to day is kind of just something that's I'm interested to get your view on actually. But just moving back to the whole kind of data piece, we know that data quality is a major driver or determiner even of automation, particularly in complex areas like housing benefit and overpayments. I'm interested to know how automation, in your experience, because it's so closely tied to better data, what risks do HAs face if they ignore that link?
It's simple, really. If you can't automate chaos, I alluded to this earlier. If your data is poor, an agent will just make mistakes faster than a human. Sure. And automation will make that mistake quicker. Automation doesn't hide your data problems; it exposes them. If you get the basics right, names, date of births, our household compositions, all of that essential information, your success rate skyrockets. Okay. The risk of ignoring that is twofold. Well, it's a reconciliation nightmare. You can never see the woods for the trees, and you lose the residents' trust. If different departments give different answers to different questions because the data's messy, the confidence erodes. So good automation forces good data discipline.
Of course, yeah. That makes absolute sense. So yeah, so let's move on to the impact on team members. I mean, that's interesting in that we know that when we apply efficiency, it makes people more efficient, and it means that they're not doing the kind of drudgery and the tasks that can easily be automated by the machine, right? So when they're being freed up to do more meaningful work, in theory, I guess what you're saying is that now the work they're doing is more cognitively interesting, it's more kind of diverse, it's just more intellectually stimulating and interesting work. What's been your experience of that on frontline staff? How did that manifest itself?
So change management and the adoption of automation has very, very little to do with technology, and everything to do with trust. And we need to make our colleagues co-creators from day one. So we used agile ways of working, where the staff are essentially the product owners of the automation or the area that we're looking at, and then as part of that process and as part of the prototype and the build, where a staff member sees a digital agent taking away soul destroying mailbox task, or the copying and pasting of information, or 2,000 searches in the housing management system, the fear moves away, essentially, and you can see the smile or the realization of the difference that will make into their daily life and the work that they'll be able to do. And my message was always honest. So we're not automating people out of the jobs.
Right.
We're automating the boring out of the jobs.
Okay.
And it's about giving people their time back to focus on the complex human problems that a machine cannot touch.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned fear, taking the fear away, but that has it's a dichotomy, isn't it? There's another side to that, in that whenever automation's mentioned, or robots, people worry about jobs, right? That's the kind of a natural consequence of that. So what reaction do you get from staff, and how did you bring people along that journey? How did you kind of allay those anxieties initially?
And we touched on this earlier. That's about making them co-producers from the very early. So we go back to the initial hothouse. So we all identify this as a friction or a pain point in the organisation. So admin, repetitive admin, high volumes of admin. So these are pain points that our staff and our colleagues are aware. We then enabled them to co-produce what that programme looked like. So where could we make a difference in and what we're automating? So the staff and our colleagues were with us in creating those business cases and what they look like. So we could look at the amount of transactions. We can look at the amount of time and effort that's utilised in doing this. We could see their part as that human bridge in what they were doing. So the uploading of documents, the scanning of information, the searches that we're doing to clarify that, and then the pain points that they were looking at. We then use them as part of the service design process. So we looked to help them. They helped us come up with the specification of what that automation should look like. Because these colleagues as well know the processes inside out. They know the niches of the systems. They know the one claim that's going to come in a lifetime. They know the rules and the logic that needs to do. They understand the part of the business. And we utilise them on the journey. And we use that in a more agile development. So every 2 weeks, we'd show them the prototype of what the automation was looking like. At that point as well, they're seeing that we're being open and transparent in delivering that change. But we could see them at that point where they could see what the automation was doing. We could see that they could actually see that they would no longer have to spend a day managing an inbox, moving invoices around for colleagues to administer. We could see that they could see too many C's there, I apologise. They could see what the automation would do for them when that was going into the housing management system, finding the information it needed to retrieve from 10 different screens, and then inputting that into another screen. We could see the realisation of we were taking away the boring and the monotony, and how they could then potentially utilise that to reach their potential, but then also to deal with those more complicated items. So they were born from the beginning. Everyone has resistance to change, but if you take them on the journey, the fear then dissipated. So they could actually see the potential of what that could deliver. And from that as well, they would then give us service improvements for how we could make it better as well going forward. So we didn't stop when we launched. We then continually refined the automation of what we could do. They were part of our journey. So to build trust and guidance, they were the human in the loop. So at any of our automations, when they first started to go before they went completely live, a human in the loop would check each and every automation that the bot was going to process. So they would check that, and that's how it built trust and guidance as well. The trust and confidence with that system, because they could see that the bot would execute exactly how it needed to. And the business then signed off they signed off that we were happy to automate that full process. So any automation, there's normally an area of trust and confidence to build up in the first so many months that before the bot completely, or the automation completely hits the send button, that we would validate and check that. So it's like any toddler. And as soon as they trusted that it could walk by itself and what we were delivering was 100% accurate, we took the reins off. So we allowed it to do the full end-to-end process. And then with human guardrails at the end of that processing, where for the transactions it couldn't process, they're the ones, the more complicated ones that our staff then would pick up. But you're looking in 30,000 transactions, the automation would pick up 90% of them. And then the 10% where it wouldn't be able to pick up, our staff would pick up as humans in the loop to validate that. But also with any automation, there's a full auditable, transparent export or report that comes out, so we can see at any point how the automation has been processed, the information it's retrieved. So there's due diligence as well around what we can see, how we then work with that, and the auditability that we can put in as part of that process. So we took the staff on the journey to show them the delivery of taking boring out of their workload, and also gave them the potential of what they could then realise themselves with what that looked like for them in the future.
Amazingly comprehensive answer, so thank you for that. I'm interested to just draw some of these strands together now. So in terms of doing it properly, and sharing, you've shared a lot of experience and a lot of interesting insight with our audience today. But do you feel that conversation's now shifted from should we automate to how do we do it properly? And what does good joined up automation look like in practice for teams and the people they support?
Absolutely. The should we, that debate's over, I believe. The real question is are we designing for residents or are we designing for internal convenience? So that's the question that we should be asking ourselves. So the debate is open for automation. It's just what the focus now looks like, and when we're developing that automation, where the services that we're delivering should be, foremost for the impact into our residents. And by doing that properly, that's around. That means an omni-channel approach. So a resident starts an AI chat or an interaction with us. It updates our CRM system or how we collect our customer information. That triggers a notification which lets an officer know or someone in our organisation know that we need to help this resident, or they require a human in the loop to pick that information up. The end goal is the resident comes in, they ask a valid question, and the automation can actually, in the first instance, if it's within a set of rules, go back and answer that and update the system to let us know that our resident has asked that question. It then elevates that to an officer if it's outside its area of expertise or anything else. So, let's look at complaints handling. That first complaint could come in and be logged into our system. It goes back and lets our resident know it's been logged, and then can start that first potential scanning and looking to investigate before it then escalates that to a human in the loop. So we can speed the process up with our due diligence. We can go back within the timescales to our residents, but also it makes the resident feel that they're being heard, because we're going back to them, acknowledging the information that we have, and we're on the case for that. So it's no longer a fire and forget. It comes into a mailbox. That's not what automation should be about now. It should be looking at that end-to-end process. And it needs to be safe and responsible. It needs to be safe and responsible in any of those processes that we need to do in. So our guardrails need to be there. And that's new for housing, in looking at how what ethical AI looks to them, and our policies and our processes that we have in there. So it has to be done sensibly. And again, the future isn't about more automation, it's about better designed digital agents that work in service of people and not our systems. And that's what joined up automation looks like for me.
Just as an aside, not aside, but it's related, but we work in a heavily regulated environment, don't we? Especially when it comes to working with bodies like the DWP. Did you encounter any challenges there? What was it like aligning automation with their rules?
The DWP are a heavy regulated organisation, and it's a difficult conversation to find initially someone in the DWP to have that conversation with, because they're not easy to contact or in any shape nor form. And it took the DWP quite a lot of lobbying and some conversations with a selection of housing associations to get to where we have, and their agreed governance that they have around what we can automate and how we can run automation as well. But they're at the table now, and agentic AI is not going away. So it's how we can work as a housing associations to bring together those government departments, or where we're heavily scrutinised, together to have that conversation going forward. Because as housing providers with lots of complicated data, with lots of transactions, we need to embrace technology, and we need to embrace automation in how it delivers and the benefit it delivers to us as organisations and to our residents in how we deliver those services. So it's a difficult conversation, but we need to ensure that we're talking with all of our partners in how we can make those services better, and how we can utilise with guardrails and responsible AI, and how we can deliver those services to our service users and what that looks like.
So if there's one message you would want your colleagues, other housing leaders, to take away from your experience, what would that be, Suzanne?
So let's eliminate the waste. Let's look at what we can automate on those heavy volume transactions that are ripe for automation, where we don't need a human to touch them. We need guardrails and sensible policy in place, but let's let technology help us do the heavy lifting and shifting, enabling us to innovate our staff to focus on the services that make the most difference to our residents and those more complicated areas where automation can't help us. But a human can in the delivery of those services. So I will always go back to my mantra: let's eliminate the waste. Let's automate those high value transactions where we can do them more speedily and readily, and let's innovate where our humans and where our staff add most value.
Okay, look, it's been great having you on the podcast, Suzanne. Thanks for sharing your experiences, practical insights on automation, digital transformation, and what really it takes to drive change in housing organisations. I think your insights have been so valuable. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you very much.